Barefoot Nation. This week I have a phenomenal video for you. It is a late summer garden tour. The garden is about 2 years old now, and it's going to be my longest video yet. So just be sure to grab a drink and a snack.
If it's wine or whiskey, I won't judge you.
But anyway, yeah guys, just enjoy this video. I am absolutely over the moon amazed with how well everything is doing this year. So without further ado, let's get into the garden. So can we just take a minute here to appreciate how beautiful my Thai constellation Monstera is? I absolutely love this plant, and I know it's kind of like not really rare anymore or whatever, you know, the saying that is based off the Marines. There are many Thai constellations, but this Monstera is mine. Or there's many this, but this one is mine, something like that. Anyway, I absolutely love it, and this plant is really a testament to putting your plants outside for the summer. This area is one that I have been changing quite a bit as of lately here, and I think that it's finally sort of gotten to where I'm really super happy with the design and the plants. This is of course right behind the fire pit, so the goal with any fire pit area that I design, I want to have it be sort of enclosed and comfortable. So like, these chairs are wet, but I'm gonna sit here anyway. You know, you want to have like a feeling. I personally want to create a view. So like these contemporary cut flagstone steps sort of lead your eye out. And you'll notice that all of the plants are sort of, for the most part, supposed to be about between 2 and 4 feet tall, really. Except for the bananas, which will eventually form a canopy. Man, these bananas really have been through the ringer this year. I don't know what happened to them in spring or something that could have even started last year, but they did not look good for most of the summer. It's really why they're so small. Even basically when I left for pandemonium, which is in sort of like the second to last week in August, I just had gotten frustrated and I cut off every single open leaf like this, and basically these leaves looked even more, tattered than this one. This one actually looks pretty good comparatively. But previous to that, I had been probably not watering enough. These Musa basjoo bananas in colder areas, they really need to be sort of babied and given a lot of TLC and water and fertilizer at minimum for the first 4 years that they've been planted. I think that's probably a non-negotiable if you want them to grow into behemoths and sort of be able to protect themselves later on in life. I just wasn't doing that. I was not watering this plant enough this year, and probably even last. And the reason for that, so the audio wasn't great here. So what I'm saying in this clip is I was relying on the splash from a water feature to think that that would be enough to irrigate a very thirsty plant such as a banana plant, and that just isn't going to cut the mustard. When you're trying to get plants established, you need to water them slowly, deeply, and irregularly. And sprinklers are a similar thing where they're just not good enough to water plants to get them established. The way that I sort of got around that, or sort of fixed the problem, hopefully permanently, is I used root stimulator and synthetic fertilizer. So synthetic fertilizer is going to force feed a plant and kind of make it grow. And so by doing that, you know, in doses that are stronger than the label, I think, especially the root stimulator, which also has fertilizer in it, I think that's really what made the difference to these banana plants. And so now you can see that they're doing really well. Another thing that I did is I learned with tree ferns with some folks over in the UK. They actually like water the stem and the crown. So what I've been doing this summer is I've also been watering the crown and letting the crown sort of fill up with water. And as a result, these leaf bases are definitely much more swollen like they should be, as opposed to how it was before. The stalks were really, really skinny. And that's still a skinny banana stalk. Leave your dirty comments. Keep your dirty comments to yourself. Where was I? Another sort of downstream effect to using the chemical fertilizer regularly is I think these carnivorous plants are really sort of hurting for it. If you'll notice this plant here, this was the Sarracenia tarnock. And Sarracenia tarnock is a beautiful, you can see, I'm not going to get too close to the water feature and talk just because it's going to be too loud, but I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. But on a much larger scale, you know, the plant is supposed to be big, and I'm thinking that it's putting out these weird, more normal looking leaves. It's weird for a Sarracenia because there's too many nutrients and it doesn't need the pitchers to catch bugs. These guys really need, they don't just like, they need to have a soil that has very little nutrition in it, which is why you plant them in basically 50% peat, 50% sand. The sable minor here though, this dwarf palmetto, this guy looks really good. It was planted last March and out from a 3-gallon pot and a fantastic palm grower out of Ohio. All of my sable minor palms are really starting to take off and look phenomenal.
Blue jays and plains and thunder, oh my, holy scratches, man.
And then the similar looking palm out there, is actually not a sable. It's this palm that you see here is actually a Bismarckia nobilis. So this is a zone 10, maybe 9B, that's up for debate, palm tree. So this plant is actually faux planted. So you can see the black there, or maybe hopefully you can't. And so I'm experimenting with certain plants to basically leave them in their nursery pot and see what they do and how that affects them. Palms are pretty tolerant of being root bound, so palms are a great candidate to do that. And the reason, of course, that you would heal a pot in the ground is because I'm in zone 6, Western New York, and this plant being hardy to zone 10, yeah, that ain't gonna be perennial. So, but it is absolutely gorgeous from every angle that it's visible. Is so worth having true tropical plants in the garden. But if you imagine, sable minor is basically gonna look like this, but slightly less intense of a color and maybe a little smaller, but it depends on cultivar. But my dwarf palmettos should grow into something like this. And this is an area that I've been working on quite a bit. I've never really been happy with the design of this area. Basically, since I've created the garden, there's really a myriad of different reasons why, but the conclusion that I've come to is there was just way too much going on. So it was kind of just like a hodgepodge of plants, or as my mother would say, I vomited plants all over this area. It's growing on, still here. I had a nitrogen fixing shrub called an Ellie Agnes. I had an Ellie Agnes, which is a nitrogen fixing fruit producing shrub, but it really wasn't doing much and it was kind of disjointed. So I dug out the Ellie Agnes and potted that up into a nice decorative container that you'll see in a little bit. Then I planted this Prague Viburnum in its place. And so an instant plant that gives me the height that I want right now. So what I'm saying here is that the color of the Prague Viburnum to me kind of looks like the colors are all mixed together, all the different shades of green from the Calatheas, the Liriope, even the stems of the taro and black mondo grass. It all looks similar. Even though their tags say full sun, I do think that they prefer a part shade environment. And then of course the big blue Liriope, which I think is big blue. Let me go on a quick rant here. So big blue Liriope is supposed to be a Liriope muscari, which is a clumping form Liriope. So either nurserymen are selling Liriope spicata, which is the spreading type, and they're labeling it as Big Blue because spicata, you know, they want to get rid of them. Or what's going on is spicata and muscari, so basically the running type and the clumping type are hybridizing, because you have to be you have to be really careful. Now, I love Liriope. It's one of my favorite plants because it works so well in Japanese gardens and tropical gardens. It's just a really nice understated, you know, it could be a ground cover. You could use it as sort of a border edge, as you see here. Well, I'm showing you 3. But you can see that it's kind of being used as like an edge to this bed, and that's really nice. But if I'm purchasing a clumping Liriope, then I want it to frickin' clump and to not have nurserymen be hybridizing purposely or not, or selling the spicata. So yeah, the way you can tell most easily if it's a spreading type or a clumping type is the spreading types are going to have their rhizomes wrapped around the pot several times if you have a good grower that, you know, doesn't sell plants prematurely. Whereas the muscari types are going to be a really nice sort of neat little clump. So rant over, the next really nice plant in this area is the Japanese iris, and that of course is providing a similar yet different texture to the Liriope, and also of course the variegation. So these are beautiful in June, although I'm really mostly growing this plant for its foliage, because you can see the foliage is absolutely gorgeous. Heading this way, I have a menagerie of potted plants that are, you know, messy, but, you know, there's hardy heliconias, zone 8 hardy heliconias, and zone 10 heliconias, and a bird of paradise that had mealybugs, so I gave it a frost, and now it's slowly recovering. That was kind of dumb. Should have just sprayed it with neem oil. And then there's this Enset banana that still is not producing big leaves. Really don't know what that's about. Both Enset bananas are just absolutely freaking pathetic this year. And so here you can see this is that Elaeagnus that I was talking about. So this plant, when I dug it out, its roots were all of about 6 inches deep, no deeper, and relatively wide. So I think that the soil was just too wet for that plant. So the reason this plant is cool is because this will look just like this all year and be totally evergreen. I'm not really sure. They say it's hardy to zone 6, and then other similar hybrids are also listed to zone 7. So I don't really know what temperature it's going to be hardy to. Having it in a pot is going to be just a nice focal point, kind of like what a lot of us tropical gardeners use windmill palms for, is so that you can have palm trees outside beyond summer, you know, into fall and early winter, and then you just take these potted plants indoors. Of course, it's sitting next to another potted plant, which is this wonderful French lace Weigelia. And the French lace Weigelia is going to get planted in place of a gorgeous tropical salvia that gets dug out in fall, just like with the bananas and cannas. So I don't want to say that I'm not happy with this area, because it's beautiful. I mean, it really is. But these gingers, these Alpinia zerumbits, are just not doing well. They're basically green. I have a green form Alpinia zerumbit, and it looks a lot better than those, not just being sort of dripped or dribbled with the occasional yellow leaf. This one here definitely has more variegation, so if I dig up any of them, it's going to be this one. Here too, you can see a Camellia sasanqua, and this variety is Winter's Joy. The reason I actually forgot what variety it was, but that's why I kept the tag on the plant. Just make sure when you do that, you don't girdle the trunk. So when all the tropical glory is a thought for next year, in other words, when After all the banana plants and gingers that are worth digging up get dug up, and there's not as much growing on out here, it's really nice to have plants like these camellias that are going to not only be green all winter, but they're gonna flower. And so you might be thinking, that thing looks horrible. Well, I just planted it last spring, or last winter, actually. Didn't want to wait till spring. Luckily, we had a mild winter. One of the things that I'm guilty of as far as design goes is just putting details in every single nook and cranny. And you can see right here, this is actually a philodendron Parizo verde, and this beautiful aster, man. Look at that. It's mulch now. Oh, now I can see the dandelion. So I'm just gonna... Alright, so... And there's another one. Screw it, I don't care. Dandelions fix calcium into the soil so they can... And they're technically edible in early spring before they flower, so screw it. The dandelion can stay there for now. So, the Parizo verde is a really nice philodendron that is supposed to be variegated. I don't know, maybe the newest leaf? Nah, no. This guy might be getting too much light. I'd be a little surprised at that, because this corner here, generally it'll get sun first thing in the morning. It gets a couple hours of direct sun, but I don't know, maybe that's too much for it. Could be the soil too, it's just planted directly in the soil. You can see I have this really nice sort of Japanese stepping stone path that I'm encouraging the bamboo. I'm actually rhizome pruning this timber bamboo to grow back into this area and have this stone here be fully surrounded by bamboo. And I'm probably gonna put some lights to point into the grove. Bamboo sounds really nice in the wind. And then once the columns get bigger too and they sort of clack against each other, it's really nice. So you can see also here I have a clump of 3 of these beautiful trio star calatheas, or not calatheas technically, but stromanthes or prayer plants. And these guys are really cool. I had a big clump originally that I had in a pot with no drainage. Now if you do plant these in aquatic situations, it has to be in a situation where they're getting water and aeration to their roots. Or a pondless waterfall or something where their roots are going to be inundated, but they're going to get aeration. And that is absolutely imperative. And the potting media that these guys were in last summer was just sort of gluggy and awful. And so they got root rot, and it took them really all winter under my grow space on grow mats to recover. And now, and in spring they got planted out and they look fantastic. I absolutely love mixing houseplants into an area that is like wild. Like this is, believe me, this is managed, but like it's still, they look natural. I just think they look fantastic. You can see here too, there are some type of native milkweed. You have to be careful with some of your milkweeds because there are, just like with bamboo, there's clumping and there's running types. And based on these young leaves, I think this is going to be a running type. So I'll dig that out, pot it up, and make sure that it doesn't take over the garden. Because rhizome pruning doesn't really work on all plants that run. So I have to be careful here because there's a yellow jacket's nest in my fence, and I'm not doing anything about it unless they decide to be jerks and do, whatever. Because yellow jackets are actually phenomenal predators. They will happily eat mealybugs off of your plants and palms. So this is a lady palm that is was absolutely riddled with mealybugs to the point where I was worried it was gonna die. But putting it next to this yellow jacket's nest, which I have no idea how big it is, but they're pretty tolerant of me, which is nice. Granted, I'm not like sitting here talking to myself normally, I mean to the camera, so they're probably not used to the vibrations of my voice. I think it's freaking them out a little bit, but I don't know. Anyway, I got a bunch of these mealybug riddled lady palms, and I'm basically cleaning them up by putting them near the yellow jacket's nest. And the reason that they're sitting in buckets is because, as you can see, it's incredibly root bound and it's kind of tough to keep well watered. Lady palms do like a lot of water generally. And something I just noticed is this palm is actually fully inundated, which is probably too much water. Again, there's no oxygen. Plants that like water, aquatic plants generally can tolerate aquatic situations because their roots are able to deal with less oxygen in their substrate or soil. And then this plant here, which you guys will get to see more once it's not close to a yellow jacket's nest. This is a Palmatophyllum stenolobum, and I saw this on Leafing Around's or Irene's channel over the winter, and I was determined to get one, and I'm so glad that I did. It is a really nice low maintenance plant, so an easy care house plant that will eventually grow huge and earn its keep in the tropical garden as a focal point once it gets big. So the other aspect to this plant is you can see it currently is getting full sun, but of course it doesn't get full sun all day. It only gets full sun for a couple hours in morning and early afternoon. This is that salvia that I was talking about from a little while ago. But so I'm just absolutely taken aback by really all of these areas of the garden, but this vignette is especially impressive because all of these plants are sort of growing at the same rate and they're sort of helping push each other along. And one of the things so this is a jungle style garden. So this, part of the reason that I really don't want to see mulch is because I'm still dealing with bindweed, and bindweed can and will use your plants as a living trellis, and eventually the vines get so dang thick that they break the stems of your plants. So shading the ground. And so one of the things that having a heavily planted garden does is it's going to tell your soil that, hey, there's no need, or there's less need for weeds between the shaded, cool soil and adding a lot of organic material. You're basically going to slowly reduce your weed pressure when you do that. The worst thing you can do for your garden is have like one plant here and another plant like 3 feet away and just a ton of mulch, and even worse yet if it's the synthetic mulches or dyed mulch. But yeah, so this area is absolutely fantastic. I'm loving how it's turning out. The Maui Gold Colocasia is as big as I've ever grown it to be, which is incredible. It's fully shading these hardy Blatilla orchids, and I did a video on those while they were blooming in spring, and this is sort of the perfect, this seems to be a really good amount of light for some of these plants. And then of course I have a newly planted Calla Flame. So this is a hardy type calla lily if you plant them deep enough, and that's always lovely to have your calla lilies come back, even here in Zone 6, because I have found that plants that you leave in the ground and just protect them if they need it, they are so much better than that same plant that you have to dig and replant. And I'm currently talking about calla lilies. I have to show you guys this white giant. Just take a look at this plant, guys. This calla lily, no joke, is easily So this calla lily is easily 5 feet tall, if not like 4 and change. So, I mean, it's just, this has only been planted here since 2022, so spring of 2022, and it is just one of my favorite plants in the garden, which I say that about basically every plant in the garden, because if I don't like it, I rip it out. We got that premise from Mark from the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, which if you guys aren't aware of the J.C. Ralston, they do have a YouTube channel, totally not sponsored, they don't even know who I am, but I do really enjoy that channel. This is a new species of hardy banana that I'm just trialing now, and I don't know if it's going to be as hardy as Musa basjoo, but it definitely is interesting because it has a very different form to Musa basjoo. So the Japanese fiber banana has leaves that hold themselves at a more sort of horizontal angle. I don't know if you can see it, the salvia is too tall, which is a phenomenal problem to have, but you can see that the angle of those leaves is much more horizontal. Of course, the newest leaves are more vertical, but this plant here is Musa yunanensis, so it comes from Yunnan, China. Again, it's kind of another wild forest banana. It's not exactly something you're going to be picking fruit off of, and especially not here in New York, unless I built a greenhouse around it. But what I love about this plant, first and foremost, is it naturally holds its leaves sort of at this really beautiful upright angle, and it has long glaucous petioles. It almost looks like Musa velutina and another species of banana that I'm blanking on the name, but long story long, it has gorgeous glaucous stalks or pseudostems. Bananas are not trees, so this is composed of leaves, what we think of, and then these are actually just leaf bases. So this is just a leaf that is, actually this is perfect. So check this out, guys. So you can see this piece here that's coming off that I'm gonna chop and drop when I'm done filming is a really nice, this is just like tightly clung to the plant, and you can see again that these younger leaves here that, you know, they just sort of come off like that. And of course, the best mulch for your plants is their own biomass. So what I mean by when I say chop and drop is, in this case, this banana leaf is small enough I can use a pocket knife, but this leaf that's sort of broken off the plant somewhat, and starting to die back, I'm just gonna take this and chop it into little pieces. And that is going to take all the nutrients that are in these leaves and recycle it back to the plant so that the plant can reuse those nutrients. So like the whole thing with leaves in autumn is absolutely asinine to the plant to basically take away its mulch. So it's like, think of on a cold night in the winter, you know, you're taking away their blankets, and also you're taking away their food for next year. So raking leaves is just, getting rid of the leaves is just one of the worst things you can do for your garden, and the fireflies would agree with that. So you can see also that the Bracken's Brown Beauty Magnolia is doing very well. I think based on the amount that it's grown this year, it's fully established, which I have heard from another landscaper who's worth their salt in my area, that they take a couple years to get established. And of course, just because they have a truck and a lawnmower and a couple tools doesn't make them worth their salt as a landscaper. But so I heard from a good landscaper that these evergreen magnolias take a few years to get established, and they should be watered accordingly. What I love about it is it has these beautiful, large, glossy leaf. The top of their leaf is really nice and leathery and glossy and thick, and then the bottom is like felt or velvet, or it's, the botanical word is tomentose. It's just a really interesting plant. And of course, it is a magnolia, so it will grow rather large in time. Although, being the fact that it's in Western New York, it could limit it some. but I don't know. That remains to be seen. I don't know of any that are... I really don't know of any or too many of these that are growing in my area and mature. We do have sweet bay magnolias, but those are basically deciduous as far as I've seen, even though a lot of sources say that they're evergreen. Not here in Western New York. But I'm really looking forward to these funky seed pods, which are also fuzzy. I'm really looking forward to these maturing and then having hopefully some viable seed. The other thing that I didn't mention is this has the standard flower and fragrance of your typical magnolias, and that fragrance is just absolutely fantastic. One thing I'm noticing is you can see here, so you can see, guys, that those seed pods just come right off, and their seeds, when they're mature like this, are really interesting red. They are very similar to a sweet bay magnolia, which is another. And then you can see too, it has this really interesting abscission point, and of course this is not too dissimilar to pruning. So I would imagine that anywhere that this abscission point happens, the tree is going to branch. You can see the bud right there, actually. And this is my evidence for that. So this is a flower from probably last year that has split off, and now there's 2 branches. So should be a really nice, relatively full tree. And while I'm zoomed in, you can see maybe a better view of that tomentosum. And so I'm just really impressed with that pussy willow and how much it's grown just this year. And I'm really excited to continue to prune on it. Hopefully it'll take on kind of a Japanese sort of vibe. And then of course I did say I was going to touch on that sable miner. So I showed you some of the other sable miners, and then of course there's this one here too. So they kind of form like, so the sable miners kind of form like an arc that's especially visible in the winter. But this one was the one that I planted first. Now this was planted out from a 3-gallon pot. It's coming from that same grower in Ohio that produces really nice plants. I have an idea of how they get them to be so big and mature in pots. Sable miner and the Louisiana types as well are palms that really don't like to be transplanted. Now you'll see people trying and, you know, probably not post update videos because the end result is, well, really any of the plants in that genus are absolutely phenomenal garden plants. But you do have to have some foresight and think about where you want them to grow, mature, and, you know, have them basically for the rest of their life. And these are long-lived plants. I mean, they'll probably outlive us. Of course, by that time, the palm would be really, really large. But you can see right here, you can see that this palm is actually producing seed. Now, it did produce a little flower stalk last year, but it didn't amount to anything. So I don't know if, like, some plants are day length sensitive. So like plants that bloom in fall have to grow all summer and then experience short day lengths. I don't know if these seeds are maturing quicker this year because, again, there's more energy with the plant, or if because I don't have a landscape light on this plant, the seeds are, you know, getting their actual day length acclimatized with the season. But regardless, I really hope that there are a whole bunch of sable miners, buffalo strain, sort of scattered around the garden. So this palm is probably about 3 feet tall. So for a palm tree here in Western New York, that's really good. And of course, the plant that's kind of growing into it right here is a Colocasia polar green. And this one is not as nice as the 2 that are growing under the pussy willow. They are on the sun side of the pussy willow, so they're still happy. And in fact, those leaves are much bigger on that side. But yeah, polar green is a virus-free form of Colocasia pink china, as far as I can tell. And pink china, of course, is one of the hardiest elephant ear colocasia varieties that you can plant have varying mileage. For me, pink China polar green does really well. But another variety of elephant ear that is supposed to be hardy is the bikini teeny. And yeah, it's alive, but that thing compared to polar green pink China is, yeah, not even a comparison. So those are supposed to be just total weeds basically, but yeah, not here, not for me ever. And I just don't know what to chalk that up to. The other cool thing is these autumn ferns are much more nestled into the garden. So last summer they were kind of just planted out in the open, and it looked really weird to have ferns, a whole bunch of ferns, just kind of in the open. So the hardy ginger is really taking up a beautiful large space, and it's only going to take more as time goes on, and I'm down for it. Of course, anywhere that it doesn't go is going to make for great divisions. But yeah, and that's the main function of the pussy willow, is to give that plant the shade that it needs. You can see that it's really lush and full because it's basically growing in full sun. But the other thing that it is totally discolored, where you can see it's getting the most sun. So right here, you can see it's really quite yellow compared to the parts of the plant that are getting the shade that they need, or the dappled light that they need. Most shade plants don't want to grow in a cave, they just want to have some nice dappled sun. And then of course you have the seedling Weigelia, had been growing for years and years in a pot at my parents' house, and now it is just totally kicking ass, and it grows about 2 or 3 feet every year. No idea how big it's gonna mature. It doesn't really flower, but I don't really care as much about that. I really just want it for its beautiful tropical clean foliage. And of course, these wonderful cherry red stems. I mean, those are as red as a Sangokaku maple. Absolutely gorgeous. Vignettes that I want to share with you guys is the clumping bamboo area. I have 2 different species that are related. So the one that I'm really excited about is Fargesia robusta. Now this plant, Western New York is really nice because we don't get extreme swings really. So Fargesia robusta, although generally listed to zone 7, this is a really nice microclimate right off my patio. It's relatively protected, and of course here in Western New York we get a lot of snow. So snow is a fantastic insulator. And of course last winter I just buried these in snow, which is perfect because they're right near a path. And these are true Liriope Big Blue. You can see, although they've been there for a couple years, they're sitting nicely in a clump, and they actually grow pretty big and tall for a Liriope. And then there's a volunteer ginger. I actually probably planted that. They don't really seed around. But there's another Zingiber yoga, which again you can see is just not happy getting the sun that this plant is getting. So to alleviate that, you can see I have an E.H. Wilson hardy mimosa. Now, for some, mimosa might be invasive, but first of all, again, go watch the invasive species video. Mimosa is one of the best nitrogen fixing trees that you can get. So what I mean by a nitrogen fixer is this plant is always going to be dark green even in poor soil if you're not using chemical fertilizer, because nitrogen fixing plants are generally in the pea and bean family, and those plants are going to, at the roots of the mimosa, they are going to have a relationship with different types of beneficial bacteria that actually convert nitrogen from our atmosphere, which our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, into a plant-soluble form of fertilizer. So the biomass, the leaves and branches of this tree are actually really good fertilizer that you can basically cut if you're ever pruning this tree, which this is going to need a lot of pruning in time. But if you're ever pruning a mimosa, never throw that leaf matter or any of those branches away. because it's really good fertilizer. Not to mention they're beautiful, and just like with the tropical mimosas, although this is a bigger plant, it takes more to close the leaves. You can't touch them and they close. And the other cool thing about Fargesia robusta is you can see these are new shoots. So not only do they produce a fresh crop of shoots in spring, but they sometimes will do that in summer as well. And that is one of the reasons I'm just absolutely fascinated with it. It's also the most upright Fargesia that I'm aware of that's got decent hardiness. And then of course you can see here my little succulent garden with some nice weeds is doing really well. The hardy agave, this is agave havardiana, and so this was planted, I don't remember, guys. You can, and so this plant, I absolutely love it because once they start to get some maturity to them, they get that beautiful imprint of the former leaves, which I'm just totally fascinated by. And agave, you can see it's right near a downspout. Agave do like water in the summertime. They just don't want to have excess water in their crown. But again, we get snow here, and so this thing can just get buried in snow. If you're worried about the crown, you can always take a pot and turn it upside down. But havardiana is never gonna get in. It's not like agave ovatifolia, which is a very large growing plant. This one doesn't grow usually tall. It's kind of like agave perii, if you guys are familiar with that one, except likely hardier, although perii might be hardier than we think. And this agave, I'm a little surprised because I don't think it's supposed to, is sending out pups. So this area is gonna be a really cool sort of patch of agave, and you can see I have a hardy cactus. This is the spineless prickly pear. I have no idea if it's gonna produce fruit. Of course, it'd be incredible if it did produce fruit, but it's another Zone 7 plant that I am zone pushing and seeing if it will live here in Zone 6B, firm Zone 6 here in Western New York. Some supposedly hardy giant Liriope that I can never remember the name of. You can tell it is in fact a giant form because its flowers are super low in the plant and its foliage is way up here. It hasn't really outperformed Big Blue though, so I'm not sure if it's worth it. I mean, it's beautiful. Some plants are landscape staples for a reason. And then these are snapdragons, of course, and you can see that this part of the plant I cut back a little while ago, and it has regrown beautifully. That's what I do with snaps when they sort of finish, is I just cut them back and let them reflush out. Closer to the other end of summer, these snapdragons are going to be really happy and super floriferous in the coming weeks. Again, Buffalo doesn't really we get warm in the summer, but there's never like triple digit. I've never had, actually, that's not true. I remember once having temperatures in the triple digits. You know, it's always somewhere in the summer between maybe 75 and 90 something, 92. And night times are always cool enough to have windows open. So yeah, we get some winter weather, but summer times are so freaking worth it here. And there's chicken wings. Anyway, this is another really nice plant, Sedum angelina, and it's a nice evergreen ground cover. It fills the spot really nicely. And you can kind of prune this thing to maintain it into any shape and size that you want. And then the clippings are really good cuttings. This is really cool too. I don't know how plants do this, but these snapdragons are growing out of a crack in the patio, and I'm just, of course I'm gonna leave them. Why would I pull that out? It's beautiful. And you can see I do have Trachycarpus, so of course no tropical garden is really complete without a windmill palm. I do have a couple. This is Taylor's Hardy. which is a special form because my grandmother's maiden name was actually Taylor. So this palm is probably going to be cared for a little bit more cautiously. So I'm not going to give it as much cold as it could probably tolerate because it is a memorial plant to think of my grandmother. And of course, my coral colored house is complemented beautifully with this eucalyptus. This is a Eucalyptus neglecta, which is growing really well. It had almost no root system in spring, so this plant is very much in a container for this season, and it has a Hesperaloe planted at the base with more Angelina sedum and a Zone 7 salvia, which is suede something or other, I don't know. Eucalyptus are just absolutely beautiful trees, and again, if I were to break one of these leaves off and crush it, the smell-o-vision, if that existed, would be incredible. Eucalyptus, especially fresh eucalyptus, is like, you guys just have to grow it and experience that scent for yourself. It is heavenly. Just like fresh ginger, actually. Homegrown ginger smells unbelievable. Video is already running long, so if you're this far along, thank you for watching, truly. And everything is so beautiful this year, so I'm just gonna sort of breeze through the containers as well. This here is a cat palm, and I impulse bought this at Lowe's because it had seed on it. And so cat palms are really nice, shade loving, or you know, semi-shade loving plants. But this is what the seed looked like. I have no idea what I'm gonna do with it. I'm probably gonna plant it, but I don't know, we'll see. Then probably the plant you've been looking at this whole time. I finally have had some success with golden shrimp plants. Now I have 3 of them in there, but you'd never know. So this shrimp plant is jammed into a container that's really tall and narrow, and I wonder if its roots just sort of want to go down, sort of like an avocado. In this container as well is some type of turmeric, I don't know, or turmeric, I don't know if this is an edible one or not, but when they flower, they're stunningly gorgeous. Then of course for flowers, you know, just typical impatiens. My friend Ashley calls them grandmother plants, but hey man, just because they're so basic. But so if you're not familiar, cordylines generally come planted from the growers in, like, not a 3-pack, but they plant 3 cuttings in the same pot, and personally I can't stand that. Yeah, they're nice and full, but this plant has actually grown back beautifully from being in a 3-pack. The other 2 plants are potted up elsewhere, and I just think it looks phenomenal. I love the trunk. I love it being a specimen, how it has that beautiful foliage. This variety, I don't remember the name, but it's a nice understated cordyline, really where the color is just on the edge and in the petioles. Of course, all these planters really just merge together beautifully. This is actually a Viridec trough planter, which they are expensive. But here's the thing, guys. Oh yeah, I got a nice weed there too. So here's the thing. I will spend the money up front on a planter, but like, this is a perfect example. You can't even see the container because the pothos are just so happy. But this is a Viridec pot that I've had for 10 years. So like, yeah, I mean, it's not a cheap container by any stretch, but at the same time, I've had it for a decade, and all the stuff that you see on their website, at least, now granted, well, it remains to be seen if these new Viridec planters are as good as the old ones, because, you know, profit margins and cutting corners to make more money is a thing with some companies. I hope Viridec isn't one of them, because I do really like their pots. And then of course you can see here, this is a ceramic container that I have a Calathea orbifolia in, and then a white fusion sort of tucked in as well. Off with this amazing elephant ear that came back from last year. I mean, what can I say, guys? It's a 5-foot tall behemoth planted in a tiny little pocket garden. It very much blocks the door, but like the view from inside is absolutely amazing. And of course, there are tons of other plants planted with it, like a sable minor McCurtain. Again, this is a bikini teeny elephant ear. This is what I get out of these things. Like, I don't understand how some people have them growing like weeds, and like, I just don't. Like, this thing, dude, it is certifiably ridiculous how tiny this bikini teeny is. I'm not mad about it, I'm just laughing. Like, WTF, man? As you can see, guys, I am just so over the moon with how amazingly gorgeous everything is. And I'm going to finish off with this Hedychium coronarium. I planted this 2 years ago. I've actually had the plant for much longer. I got it off of a eBay seller, and he was selling it to me as Flaming Torch, which is another form of hardy ginger that blooms earlier. This Hedychium, I'm not sure what to chalk it up to, but it's actually going to bloom. But it has taken it's probably taken 3 years of growth to have it get to this point to where it's actually going to bloom, hopefully before it gets cold out. And I'll get to smell that wonderful fragrance. And I have another Hedychium coronarium, the large form, tucked into the jungle right here as well. Alright, y'all, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys thought. I am just, like I said, I'm so stoked with how I'm beyond stoked with how everything is doing this year. And just for shits and grins, tell me what you were drinking. If you like this video, be sure to drop it a big ol' thumbs up, just like that. And yeah, thanks for watching, y'all. See you on the next one.